Hello GRC community, and welcome back to another video tutorial to help you get started with ServiceNow's applications. My name is Eric Ferron. I'm in Santa Clara, California. And first, I want to wish you all well in these uncertain times. I hope you are all safe and in good health. Today, I'm joined by two GRC experts, Ben Forrest, who has been a guest on a number of tutorials before, and Philip Swann, who is one of our very active community contributors. Hello, Ben. Good to have you back.
Hey, always a pleasure, Eric.
Hello, Eric. Thank you for having me.
Today, we're going to talk about indicators, how important they are, and how to set them up. So, Philip, to set the scene for us, why do we want to talk about indicators?
For me, indicators are all about helping to move your GRC implementation up the maturity scale. Indicators are what really enable continuous monitoring of risk and compliance.
So here's our program for today. First, we're going to have a few quick refreshers. Then we're going to talk about the rationale behind the need for indicators, then an overview of indicators, the value that they offer, some recommended practices with the product demo, and of course, we're going to end up with some recommendations. I will get us started with a couple of refresher slides. As usual, this tutorial is part of the Get Started with GRC series, so really aimed at people and organizations in the early stages of implementation. We want to make sure that you have the knowledge and tools to quickly realize value from the product. In the future, we will have more tutorials for the more advanced people and organizations. Here is a slide you've seen before. It helps position indicators into the overall life cycle of a control. We saw this slide in a tutorial we did last year with Scott Ferguson. There is a link in the bottom left corner of this slide. You can access it to the PDF version of the slides. All right, Ben, I would like to start with you. Please help us understand what indicators are.
Great. Well, so indicators really are they're sort of the canary in the coal mine. They're the pretest between audits that we use to make sure that we understand whether or not the control is actually compliant or not. Now, of course, we have our folks that are the control owners that are doing the attestations themselves, but the indicator actually is our gauge. It lets us know if the entity is actually compliant or non-compliant. So in the old days, people thought of traditional control tests. We used to do them kind of out of a sense of paranoia. Sometimes they'd be called QA. You know, you'd get the auditor that would be like, "Oh, I'm here to see if you're compliant. Please provide me your list of controls." And the policy person would go, "Okay, here you go. Yes, we're quite compliant. And note the large number of our rules related to your laws, etc., etc." You know, the auditor would go, "Well, this is very nice. When we checked last time to ensure that your employees were following these controls, when was that?" Of course, policy person would be like, "You know, all of our employees are, of course they're compliant, and they always follow the rules. They don't violate these rules at all, ever, because it's in our policy." And of course, the auditor is going to come back and say, "Well, yeah, wouldn't you mind if I simply verify this for myself?" And of course, the policy person's like, "Sure." So what we really want to see is before the auditor gets here, before that final last line, as it were, we want to be able to provide a heap of evidence that says, yes, we have constantly been monitoring things and we have our indicators that have told us exactly when we're in compliance and when we're not in compliance.
All right. So you've seen this slide before when we talked about compliance scoring. And Ben, you're going to show us where the indicators fit inside here.
Right. You might see that we've got our policies, which then relate to our control objectives, and we then instantiate all of our controls on each of our entities, whatever they might be. So in order to ensure that those controls are actually compliant, in addition to the attestations, which we're saying the first line is like, okay, we're saying that we are going to be compliant, then we have little continuous checks that evaluate whether or not they're actually compliant in real time. And this gives us an opportunity to see how to fix things as issues crop up, right? So we don't want to wait until the actual audit engagement to see an issue. We want to see it right away.
All right. And just as a reminder, there's a link at the bottom of this slide that will be available in a PDF version of the slides that takes you to the compliance scoring tutorial. So now you're going to take us through an example of this.
That's right. So we're going to take a look relating back to our previous videos. We've done basically a setup related to the current situation with COVID. And let's say that we've got a policy that says that all of our remote employees have their equipment, everything that they need to do their job. So the control objective is that we are going to say to each department head, make sure your people have what they need, right? So that's the control. Control owners, or the department heads themselves, for each of the customer support and HR and IT, etc., they're going to attest that each of their employees has what they need, right? Now, the attestation itself is great, right? And we trust our people, we trust our managers, but in order to just make sure that everybody's got all their I's dotted and their T's crossed, we're going to create an indicator, which is then going to create a validation step. It's going to be that canary in the coal mine, just that reminder, let's double check. So we're going to go ahead and instantiate a few of our indicators against each of these controls, and then we'll be able to see whether or not they're actually compliant. And you see in our example that we've got a couple of departments that are doing exactly everything that they need to do. However, we might have one that does not pass.
Okay, and we're going to see this later in the demo with Phil, how to set these things up and how it manifests itself inside the product. So this is a great, simple explanation, but I suspect that things can also get quite a bit more complicated.
Oh yeah, because we can go real deep, but we're going to start here at what we call a manual indicator. As a quick reminder to everybody, we've got several different methodologies that we can use, and at first we're going to start with the manual kind of indicator. We like to say that it's an on-ramp to getting a little bit more sophisticated in the platform itself. So we usually will start here with manual indicators, and the manual indicates that a person is going to be making a decision related to whatever supporting data we have or supporting evidence that we have. Oftentimes this means that we can really easily translate anybody's existing control tests and or their existing QC or QA methodologies that they use prior to an engagement. And we often will start here because this makes it very, very simple. We can easily translate any of those existing methodologies into a task where a human makes a decision. Now, oftentimes that's because we don't have enough data in the platform. Maybe you're just getting started with ServiceNow and the data doesn't exist in the ecosystem yet. And you may be having to check other systems to get that information, that evidence. But as you get more and more data into the system, you can still use a manual indicator, again, because a human has to make a decision. We haven't maybe set up a test or a methodology yet that allows you to feel comfortable completely automating it. Now, when we get into the basic realm, the basic indicators, those presume that all the necessary evidence is inside the ServiceNow platform itself, right? This is going to be things like your ITSM process is already generating change control records, and we can quickly assess those using a very basic pass or fail test. And then as we get more and more sophisticated, we can get into the scripted indicators, which really have no limits, right? This gives us the full power of the platform. This is where we can do things like using PA thresholds and targets and limits. We can also use this to leverage some of our integrations and so on. So the sky's the limit with scripted, but we're going to start over in the manual section because I think that's where most of our folks are really just kind of getting their teeth cut in the platform here. The way that we do this is almost exactly like we do our control objectives or our risks in other videos that Eric's done. We're going to be basically creating what we call a template, or literally just that, an indicator template. And that is going to be our method for quickly creating indicators automatically and relating them directly to some of our control objectives. So this will then propagate those indicators across all of our entities and let us know whether or not they're truly compliant. Now, when everything goes correctly, we're able to cover all of our bases. So in our previous example where maybe the third line kind of comes in and says, hey, let's go ahead and check all of your controls and make sure that you're really doing what you say you're doing. When we have indicators, this provides us a great level of detail that we can hand over to the audit team and say, here we go, I can show you that I have checked daily, weekly, hourly, monthly, however often we need to ensure that level of compliance. And we've got a full audit trail. This also gives us an idea over time how we're performing. So in our overall model, you've probably seen this particular graphic several times, and if you've ever taken a course with us, we kind of refer back to this model. But the indicators themselves, you'll see, come from our templates. So once we have those templates, the indicators then get brought together with our risks and our controls, and then all of that data can then later be reviewed during the audit engagement itself, and we can use that to report findings and issues and so on.
Thank you very much for this, Ben, for this very complete introduction to
It's my pleasure.
indicators. Excellent, thanks. So let me move now over to Phil. And Phil, you're going to do a little demo for us. The workflow we're going to follow is described here. First, we're going to create an indicator template, and we're going to go through the process of finding the control objective, naming the template, putting together the schedule, the method, the supporting data. Then we're going to create the indicators themselves for all of the relevant controls for the entities that we're working with. That we mean actually selecting the template. And then we will execute the indicators to see what sort of results we get. And to make this applicable to Ben's example, we want to follow this model here And we're going to focus really on creating those indicators only for customer support and finance, because it will be the same thing for the other entities. So we can go through the process of all the way down to a fail indicator and a pass indicator. Does that work, Phil?
That sounds perfect.
All right, so let me switch over now to the demo instance. So here we are, Phil. So now please guide me to the creation of the indicator template, please.
Exactly. So we're going to create an indicator template against the control objective. An indicator template is going to give us a consistent approach to automatically test that control objective consistently for each of those controls. So if you navigate to your control objectives,
Control objective.
and we want to find the control objective for all employees have remote working equipment.
So I do the star, all employees, to do the search, and I find the control objective called employees have remote working equipment. Now, a quick note, it says empty here, and I believe that this is because this control objective was created and was not imported from an external database. Is that right?
Yeah, sure. So when you load your data in from the likes of UCF has a unique reference for that. So that would be populated. But you can use this reference field for your own references as well. So if you've got some documentation stored offline and you're moving into ServiceNow from your Excel sheet, for example, you could populate that reference manually. But in this case, we don't have one, so it's empty.
So from here, we want to create a indicator template. Is that right?
Exactly. So on your related lists at the bottom, you will find indicator templates. And from here, if you click new, that's going to pre-populate the control objective. And this is where we want to start filling out the information about the indicator template.
So we put a name here, right? Manager validates remote employment equipment. This is the name for our indicator template, right?
Perfect. Yes. And we just work through now those form sections. So for the schedule, I think we probably want to do this monthly.
Method.
And then into the methods, it defaults to manual, and that's the type we're going to work through today.
Okay.
So we just need a short description. This is the description that the indicator task is going to get. So something like manager validates remote employee equipment.
Okay.
Exactly. And then the instructions. This is what we're telling the person who receives that task to do. Okay. So a manual indicator is going to generate a task. So this is the instructions, something like please review attached asset list to ensure that your teams have access to all of them.
All right.
We've got value mandatory there. We don't want to make the value mandatory. And then supporting data. This is where we really harness the power of the platform and that better together story, because the information that we want the manager to review is available in the platform. So if we tick collect supporting data, this will help the manager in this case to make the decision. If you click the table and just type computer, there'll be a few options in here, but we want the CMDB CI computer. The supporting data fields, this is now where we can make that information that's presented a bit more meaningful. So something like name, manufacturer. Yeah, you can just double click as well here, actually.
There you go.
Assigned to, so we want to know who's got that piece of equipment, location, asset tag, operational status as well. Make sure it's not retired or missing. And then the next thing that's going to help make this meaningful is that use reference field. That's going to enable us to tie the computers back to the control itself. Okay, so our controls are being done by department. So how do we get from computer to the department? So click the plus next to the assigned to department. So
this
click,
one, right?
Yeah, click the actual text. And you can see then the reference field is the assigned to department. So when we execute this indicator, it's going to go and get all of the computers that belong to the department that the control is for. So in our case, we're going to focus in on customer support and finance. So it's going to show all of the equipment for the users within customer support for one indicator and all of the equipment in the finance department.
And this is because the entities that we've chosen belong to the department and vendor's entity type.
Exactly,
they are
yes.
departments.
So the reference field is very important. It's very powerful. If you didn't tick use reference field, you would just get all of the computers that meet the condition. But here our criteria is blank. Okay, we want to see everything. When you save this, because we're at the indicator level, the system is going to automatically produce an indicator for all of the controls against that control objective. So a lot of the hard work is being done for us right now. It says it may take a few minutes. There's not a lot of controls here. We're talking about 8 controls, so only 8 indicators. If you just right-click on the top bit and reload the form.
Very good.
There is a point here, and one of the things you may want to do is actually modify your list layout to make sure that you can see the entities from here. Okay, but that's a different task, something that we might do as part of some implementation. But if you just scroll up to your control objective field, and let's go into that control objective and see how that looks. So from here, we can see all of our controls. We can see that the indicator template we just created now exists. And
here,
in the
it's this one. Yeah.
Exactly. And in the controls list, which is just next to it, if we look at our finance and go into that control, this will now have an indicator against it.
There we go.
And obviously this control, I don't know if you're going into it already, but if you just scroll up, just notice that this control doesn't have a status yet. It's still in draft. It hasn't gone through the process, but the status is none. Okay, so that status at the very top, that is going to change now because we're going to execute the indicator.
Do we need to keep this control in state draft, or do we move it to monitor?
Typically, we want to get them to monitor, but you can execute them while in draft. There's nothing to stop that happening. So if we scroll down to the indicator, and let's go into that indicator. So the indicator template was for the control objective, and that gave us the control objective wide approach. And now we've got an instance of that indicator template, which is an indicator. You do have the option here to override the template. And also in the supporting data, if you just open that form section, you'll see that the reference field can actually be changed, okay, without overriding the template, because that's the one thing that ties it all together. So the reference field should be reviewed once you've got your indicators, but for us, we don't need to do that. What we want to do is just click execute. Because this is a manual indicator, it's going to create an indicator task, okay? So it doesn't automatically create the result, it creates the task. And because Natasha is the owner of the department entity, Natasha is going to receive an indicator task. So if you just scroll down and look at the related lists and just go into indicator tasks and right click on that header bar down there and refresh list, we've now got an indicator task. So we could go back as well, go back up to the control objective, do the same thing for the customer support.
So let me go back here and search for the control objective.
All employees have remote working equipment.
Here we go.
And let's find the one for customer support.
So yes, Natasha, the one is here. So I go to the control, which is here. Status none, state draft. So same thing here.
Yeah, and we've got an indicator down there. So for that one, we just go into that and execute it, and then we'll have an indicator task for each of these department owners.
It's executed. And
excellent.
Indicator task. I'm going to refresh.
And one other thing to just check on before we go through this process, maybe it might take a moment.
There you go.
There we go. Perfect. Okay, and that's gone to Rob Woodburn as well.
Yep.
So just navigate back just to the control objective and just take a note of that control objective's compliance score percentage. Yeah, so you can see that's 0, okay? Just bear that in mind. And then we can go in as Natasha. And Natasha has now received an indicator task in the application navigator. Just type in their indicator and you can see my indicator tasks.
It is here.
So Natasha's received an indicator task, and everything Natasha needs to do for this indicator task should be spelled out in this task now from the generation of that indicator. So you can see that she's got the short description we entered, and she's got a set of instructions. And it says, please review the attached asset list. And that supporting data that we created has presented Natasha now with a list of 40 computers. She can see who they're assigned to, the location, she can see the status and the asset tag. Now Natasha can make a decision. Now Natasha is the head of the finance department, and from our scenario we know that the finance department has got all the equipment they need. Okay, so Natasha looks at this list. This is a task, right? So this is in ServiceNow one of the powerful features of tasks. So if you just scroll back up to the top there, Eric, and we can see things like additional comments, right? So she can track this work. She might not be able to do this straight away, but she can use additional comments.
So she can say here, all team members have the equipment they need.
Exactly.
Because she knows a team and they're talking about it in one-on-ones, in all hands, or she sent an email to a team and they all responded, everything is good.
Exactly, but this equally could say, I'm just waiting for Annie to get back to me and make sure Annie's happy. Okay,
correct.
So she can use that to track this task and just click the state at the top. You see that drop down, it says open at the moment. So there are a few options here. She could move this to work in progress and just help show, and track her workload. But right now we're just going to jump straight to this decision. Natasha's made the decision. All team members have the equipment they need. So if you just change that to closed, and you can see the result is now mandatory. So it's either a pass or a fail.
And in this case, she's passed.
Exactly. And if we had have ticked make value mandatory, then that value would also be mandatory, but it doesn't quite fit here. But that could be a number, it could be a string, you could type a word in there, but it's not mandatory. So just click save on this, and you can see that an indicator result has been created. And just click back to my indicator tasks, and you can see that's now closed as well. So
let's do the same for Rob.
Exactly. And Rob's the head of customer support. Okay, so
Rob has got 2.
Okay, so the one we want to look at is the most recent one, the 2005. It looks like Rob has a little bit more permission than Natasha, because some of these fields are not read-only like Natasha's. So Rob maybe is a compliance manager or a bit more privileged. Yep. But the same is true here. But customer support, you can see there's 295 computers. It's got a much bigger team, and remote working for customer support is probably a bit trickier.
So we're going to say, for example, Catherine has not responded, or she does not have the equipment needed.
Yeah, Catherine needs another monitor or a new chair. But in the additional comments, maybe we want to put some information in there. You know, Catherine needs a new chair. Catherine needs a new monitor. And the same story, right? In terms of how do we complete this journey, the state will be changed. So we'll close this. Okay, and you'll see the same message will come up. An indicator result has been created. Also notice everything's gone read-only here. That task is closed. You can't change it. You can't come back and done, right? It's a point in time. But next month, that schedule will run again, and Rob will have to answer the same question.
And check with Catherine again, or the whole team. All right, so now we need to go back to who we are, the system admin, right?
Exactly.
And then do a check on the indicator results.
Well, let's just start with the control objective, right? Let's just go and see what that compliance score is going to look like. Pass or fail.
Search for all employees with a star at the front, and we see control objective, and we see a compliance score. That's what you wanted to show, right? Compliance score of 50.
Exactly, yeah. because of the two controls that have now got a status, one is compliant, one is non-compliant.
Thank you very much for this demo. So here are the big insights, I think, at least in my view. Indicators are easy to create and they really make compliance easy. What seems to be really excellent also is that it brings everything into this one system of record that makes things simple. And it looks like this is really the key which enables you to do continuous monitoring and have this continuous view of how your business is doing. Do you want to add anything, Ben?
Yeah, I just wanted to really second that and hammer it home, right? We don't want to be losing any of our tests in spreadsheets or, spread out across different systems. We want to have it all in one place, all the tasks available, and make sure that we keep everything kind of centralized. So one system of what I like to call engagement.
All right, so we're coming to the end of this tutorial, and we usually end up with recommendations on what to do right now, right at the end of this tutorial. So what would be your recommendation, Ben?
Well, I would pay close attention to Phil's demo and see if you can translate one of your own control tests into a manual indicator, and then see about maybe thinking through how to create a basic indicator using kind of a similar style or similar model if you have the data available in the platform. And make sure that you go back and review some of the previous videos to understand entity scoping and see how that can apply. And if you don't have the necessary entities set up, make sure that you've got those so that you can get your indicators attached to those along with your controls.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you very much, Ben. A few reminders before we close. Of course, the PDF version of the slide is available in the forum. You may have questions. Do not hesitate to post them in the Governance, Risk and Compliance forum. And the very last thing that I want to share with you is this slide, which is a bit of an eyesore. It is here to be printed. So please go to the PDF version of the slides and print it out. We built this thing as a sort of cheat sheet that comprises some of the key concepts and simple definitions. You can see that the indicators are located at this level inside the sheet. Ben, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me again.
Phil, thank you so much for your time and sharing your expertise.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
And to the audience, thank you for listening. And until next time, goodbye.